All right, so the previous episode introduced anatomy and some concepts associated with anatomy. Here we're going to introduce physiology. We're going to talk about some basic concepts in physiology like homeostasis and negative feedback systems, which are things that help control how the bodies function. There are some guys out for a jog, maybe even on a track, and uh, I'll talk about physiology of temperature control, and so kind of an interesting system. Okay, so physiology is the scientific study of the function of the human body. Okay, physiology, the study of function, is really important for the study of health and disease. And so we're trying to always figure out how things work. And surprisingly, we don't know everything. Anatomy, we think we have a pretty good idea of at least gross anatomy and even microscopic anatomy. Physiology is more mysterious, more complex. Lots of physiology is uh, based on chemistry, physics, and cell biology. What do cells do at certain conditions? How do certain chemicals interact? Um, what happens when you have two chemicals next to each other? Lots of physiology happens at this very small chemical and cell level. Um, the function of whole organs depends upon their cells and the chemicals that make them up. One of the ideas that unites physiology, though, is the idea of homeostasis, that the body and organ systems function to maintain a stable internal environment, stable temperature, stable amount of water, stable amount of sugar, of salts, stable blood pressure. And that doesn't, when I say stable, that doesn't mean steady. It means fluctuating within a normal range. Body cells only work well in a narrow range of conditions, and homeostasis does this. Okay, we have systems, control systems that help us, and for the most part, these are negative feedback systems. They contain a sensor, a control center, and an effector. How does homeostasis work? Well, in the case of homeostasis, anything that changes body temperature away from that normal range is detected by a sensor. The sensor alerts the control system, and the control system activates an effector to work against that change in temperature or change in fluids or change in salts or sugars. And so it works to restore that normal range of conditions. Okay, the example they give us here is body temperature. If those guys are running on a hot day, okay, they'll be out in the sun, they'll be exercising, their muscles are generating heat, plus they're gaining heat from the sun, okay, and their body temperature will start to rise. Okay, sensory cells, nerve cells in the skin and in the brain will detect rising body temperature, and that will activate a temperature regulatory center in the brain, a region called the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus will start initiating changes. It'll cause the body to sweat. If our temperature gets hot enough, it'll cause us to seek out shade to find a cool space. And this will start lowering body temperature, will increase heat loss. And again, back to those guys, uh, sweating is a really good way to increase heat loss. Sweating allows us to put a lot of skin or a lot of fluid on our skin, and we have very smooth skin, and that fluid then can evaporate. And when it evaporates, it takes heat with it. Okay, we are among the best animals at sweating. Our, the only animals that can compete with us for sweating are horses and camels. And so we're really good at shedding excess heat. And in fact, I want to remind you that we are almost the best at it. And so other animals that are like us in many ways aren't as good at shedding heat and so can't be active when it's hot. And so there's a pug there in the lower right. A pug is a small dog with relatively short fur, but because they have fur, these animals can't really sweat. Sweating into their fur would just cause the fur to get damp, And although the fur would cool off as it lost heat due to evaporation, that cooling wouldn't cool the skin as much. And so what dogs do is they stick their tongue out and pant. And that cools the surface of the tongue, and there's lots of blood vessels in a dog's tongue, and so that cools them. But it's nowhere near as effective as sweating onto your skin surface. So while most of us, if we're in good physical condition, can go out on a 80 or 90-degree day and run for a couple miles, that would likely kill a dog. Dogs aren't able to do that because they can't maintain their body temperature under high conditions like we can. Okay, and so we're really good at that. That doesn't mean that our body temperature is the same. It fluctuates. And so during exercise it might go up, but it'll still come back towards that normal range. Okay, so we have lots of these negative feedback systems. This is a common idea in all of physiology. Occasionally, there are positive feedback systems. These are a feedback system that detects change and promotes further change. An example of this is childbirth. When the baby is getting larger and larger, that stretching of the uterus causes impulses from the cervix and the uterus to be sent to the brain. Okay, and that causes the brain to release a hormone, oxytocin. This hormone goes to the uterus and it causes muscle contractions, particularly those that push the baby against the cervix, the birth canal. And this further stretching will cause even more contractions until the child is born. And so there is an end point. We have positive feedback systems in a relatively few places. Another one might be blood clotting. And so that can produce a rapid change that can stop the loss of blood. And so that's the endpoint there. Okay, look this over, start working on the quiz, and let me know how it's going.